So welcome to the workshop today. What I'm going to do now is just quickly show you how you can install the Blender OSM file. And the way that we do that is once we have Blender open, we can go up here to File or into Edit, and we can go to Preferences. And this is where we typically will install add-ons. But we need to download the add-on first. So we're going to go online to find Blossom for Blender. So it's Blossom for Blender. And it's actually a free tool that has been created. And so we can just type 0 in there, click I want this. And then we can then specify our email address, the one that we want to get and receive this to. mu.ac.uk, and then type 0 again, and then you can just click get. And what that'll allow you to do is to download this file. So it's just verifying that I'm a human, and then I can click download. So once I've downloaded it, what I need to then do is just open up my downloads folder, and I'm going to just then take the file that I've created, and I'm just going to drag and drop it into my interface here, and then I can click there, and then I can just click OK to install it from the disk, and then it will install into here. And what you'll then see up here is when we go back to preferences is something called Blossom will appear here. Okay, so once we have that appear, what we then need to do is specify a file by opening up the arrow where we want these to be saved. So I've just created a file called Blossom in my documents. I'm just going to save them in here, and I'm going to click OK and accept. And I want you to do the same thing. It's really important that we do that step. The next step of what we need to do is we need to create or get an API key from Google Maps. So if I click get it from the API, what it's going to do is going to open up the Google Maps API. And what you need to do is just click get started. Let's go through the process, sign into your account. Now it does ask for some account information, so it's really important that you put in some information. But it's also really important that you don't choose a level of the subscription that is going to charge you. So just go on the free level. So if we just look at the different plans, and you'll see that we just want the pay-as-you-go plan. The starter one charges us $100, so we just choose the pay-as-you-go and click OK, and that's the one that we will be fine with. And then once we've done that, we can then follow the steps, and we can go to APIs and services here, and we can ensure that we turn on. We need to enable the map tiles API, which is just here. Another way we could do that is by going back, and then we can create a key. So we can click on keys here, and then it will take us to our keys. And then once we have our key generated, and we've got, so if I don't see it in here, what I can do is go to map tiles API just here, and I'm just going to go back for a moment to the steps that it takes us through on Blender, and I've created a key. I created an API key here. It should go here. I can click show key. I can then select it, and I can come back here, and I can just copy and paste it into here. And now it should allow us to use the Google 3D tiles. We should have autosave on, but if we click these 3 hamburger lines down here, we can just save the preferences, and then those will be saved. Now you can follow a similar process for getting ArcGIS and Mapbox. That's a little bit more of a long-winded process, so I'm not going to do it right now. But what I will do is show you where you can find that information. So when we go to Blender OSM, if I just go up here for a moment and I type in Blender OSM, we have this GitHub page, That's some comprehensive information about how you can download those different files and connect those different APIs if you want to connect them. Okay, so just going back into Blender now, we should have that now installed. So I'm going to just click N, and what this does is it brings out this tab, which is just here to the right of my viewport. And in there, I have these other tabs, and one of them will be Blender OSM, so Blossom. So what I can do now is select the location that I want to choose. And I'm going to click select, and it'll bring up a map. And then I can zoom in on my map and find a location. So if I find where the university is and the School of Architecture, and if we just find this area here, I can then click over here to the left and click show rectangle, and I can just center it around where the architecture school is. And then I can click copy. I'll go back to my file and I click paste. Okay, so I'm going to show you how we can bring OpenStreetMap information into here. And I'm also going to show you how we can bring Google Maps information into here also. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the OpenStreetMap information into here. But before I do that, I'm going to just generate the terrain. And what that's going to do is going to give me a terrain that I can use. There we go, of my area. Now, if you're seeing that this is clipping through, and this is just a common thing that happens, because what's essentially happening is, if we go to our tabs here to the right, if you don't see it, just click N, click View. What it's doing is clipping the end of our camera. So we just need to increase this number here to something like that, and then the clipping will be much further in the distance. So now we have this terrain of those exact coordinates. So I'll go back to Blossom here. I've got the terrain. Now I want to do the OpenStreetMap. I can import that, and we'll just give that a moment, and it's going to download the OpenStreetMap information. And the way the OpenStreetMap information will come through, it will come through in a similar way to the way we set the APIs up from Google, but it's using OpenStreetMap information. Okay, so then I can use this, I can select it, I can navigate around my model, for example. But what you'll see happen here is this is constrained so that the road is constrained to the terrain. And all that's happening here is that the faces are just intersecting one another because they're in exactly the same place. And so, you know, if you don't like that, or if you want to change that, what we would do is just make sure that we don't generate the terrain first, and then we'll create just a flat set of roads instead of having these project themselves onto our terrain. So if I delete the terrain, for example, if I select the terrain from up here, I'm just going to select the terrain there, and if I hit delete, what it'll do is it'll take those roads and they'll no longer be projected to the terrain. And so that's just one way. So if you're doing diagrams and you're not really dependent on a terrain, then this is just one way that you could bring them out without having to then export them and also have them connected to the terrain. So the next step within our workflow is then bringing in Google Street data, because sometimes the data that comes out of OSM is not always very accurate. But what I need to do to be able to do that is go back up here to Blossom, and then I'm going to go to 3D tiles this time. And I can also change what level of detail I have. If I do whole city, it's going to be a very, very, very low level of detail. And if I do buildings with more details, that's going to be the highest level of detail that we can get. So if I click buildings with more detail, and I'm going to click import, and then we'll just let it do its thing and run. And usually this can take a little bit of time for this to run. So we'll just wait for that to run and to generate. And when it does, we'll start to play around with where we can move those files. and where we can start to utilize the data that we've brought in. So it's now downloaded the building with details. And if I want to change this view, what I can do is go up to the top right of my screen here, and these are my different viewport settings. And if I just go to the viewport shading where it'll shade my materials, you're going to see that it'll shade the materials on there. Now, by default, you may have the geometry wireframe on, which will look something like that. And if you want to turn the wireframe off, we just go up to the top right, we click on overlays, and we go down to geometry, and it'll turn that geometry off. So now we have our Google file, and we also have our OSM file. And the Google file sometimes is brought up above my OSM file, and that happens because the origin point is right here. Do you see? So if I just go up, you see the origin point is this orange point here, and what that will do is it'll bring it into our file at the origin point right here. So if we want to change that origin point, what we can do is we can make the origin point so that it goes where our geometry is, centered to the geometry essentially. And in order to do that, what I need to do is I can go to Object up here, I can go to Set Origin, and I can do Origin to Geometry. And what that will do is it will move the origin point to the center of the mass of the geometry. So it's just moved it to here if I want to move that. So that's how I can move the origin point if I want to move the origin point. The other thing that I can do is I can move this cursor as well. So right now it's at 0, 0. I'm just going to go there. So right now our cursor is at 0, 0 in the X, Y, and Z. And we can move that cursor to any position. So let's just imagine that we have a file here. And if we had our site somewhere near to where this file is, maybe the park here, or we wanted our cursor to be somewhere around here, what I can do is I can go to edit mode just by going to the top left, and I can go to vertex mode and I can select a vertex. And if I do Shift and S, what I can do is I can move my cursor to selected. And now that's moved my cursor to the selected area just there. Another thing that I can now do, if I want my origin point to be where this new cursor is now, is I can do Shift and S again. And I can do selection to cursor, and it will move my selection to the cursor. But if I want to move this point to that point, I would need to go up to the top just here. I'll press escape just so that I don't have anything selected because my cursor's there. And I'm gonna just go to select my whole object. I'm gonna go to object and I'm gonna go to set origin, and I'm gonna do origin to 3D cursor. What that's done now is move my origin point to where the 3D cursor is. So if I do G, you'll see my origin point is here. And the reason that is useful is if I now to start to create geometry, I've moved my origin point to here. So whatever geometry that I create, for example, if I create a mesh, so I'm going to go up to the top here in object mode, add mesh, and I'm going to go to cube, and it will create a cube. If I just scale it, it'll create a cube at that origin point here. So if I go back to shading mode, you'll see it's created a cube here. So if I knew my building was over here and I wanted to make sure that I was modeling in this area, that's how I move the cursor, by those two commands. So I can go up to object and set the origin, or I can do Shift and S and I can move my cursor to different points in the screen. So one of the critical things now is is just making sure that when we do something like this, that these things align. So we now have Google Map data, but we also have OSM data. And if I type G in Blender, that means grab, and then I can choose either the Z-axis, the Y-axis, or the X-axis by clicking X, Y, or Z, respectively. And I can move this down, it'll constrain in the Y. But you'll see that as I move this down, our Google map file doesn't always line up with our OSM map file. And this is one of the fundamental flaws, I guess, of using two different map types, but it's also one of the issues in trying to rely on one particular map type to create my map. So if I just had OSM data, this is all I'd be presented with, really low poly. But if I wanted to get some like really more intricate detail in my model, like I wanted to check what the height of the roads were here, for example, or if I go to an area where there is terrain that I want to play around with, or where the train tracks are, and I want to see how high this bridge is, I can then start to use this information because it gives me much more information from the Google file that I can then utilize to my advantage when I'm doing my site modeling. Now, there's no quick, easy solution right now that just generates this into perfect mass and perfect geometry, but we can start to use it to inform our geometry if we want to get some more detail. And this is just a really useful way of doing that. So I can use both files to start to map my geometry. And then if I want to then create new geometry, I can easily do that. And if you prefer working in Rhino, I'm going to show you how we can export this file also into Rhino and also export it with the textures already on there. And so we can very easily now, if I just go GZ, I've got two file types here now. So I've got my OSM and I have my Google map information. What I'm going to do, I'm going to reset my origin point back to the center. So in order to do that, I do Shift and S, and I'm going to do cursor to world origin, and that's going to bring my cursor back to the world origin just here. Okay, so if I want to export the OSM data, I can select that and I can go to File and I can go to Export, and I'm going to do a wavefront OBJ. And if I do selection only, it will only export what's selected. And I can create a Blender file and I can export this. But before exporting it, I can choose what I want to export things as. So I can do objects as groups, material groups, I can do vertex groups, and so on. And I can start to export different materials also. And now there's not very many materials in here, but I can then start to play around with this geometry. And I can start to utilize some of this geometry as well to play around with what it is that I want to create. So I'm just going to make sure that I select the different file types that I want. And another thing is that by default, Blender exports things out with Z forwards. And this is because in the film industry and the game industry, cameras typically use Z as the depth of the camera, as opposed to the height of the camera, or where the camera is in terms of its height. It'll mainly work on how far the camera zooms in and out. And so we need to make sure that Z is actually pointing upwards. So we can do that here. We can change that here to Z pointing upwards, which is fine. And then we can do material groups, and we can do objects as groups, and give this a name. So Manchester MSA, for example, and then I can export this file. Okay, great. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to hide that. I'm just going to type H to hide it. And one of the other things that I'm going to do is I'm going to do G and Z, and I'm just going to bring this down because I'm going to show you now how we can bake the geometry into this file and bake the textures so that when we bring it into Rhino, it brings the textures, because by default, it won't bring the textures. So in order to do that, what we need to do is I need to just drag this up for a moment, and I'm just going to change this here in the drop down to a Python console. And we have a script that's already been prepared that will allow us to do this. And let me just explain what's happening here. I'm just going to drag another box. Wherever we have this arrow, I can drag another box just out like that. And I'm going to change this one to our shader editor. So you'll see what our shader editor looks like right now. And then when I run the Python script, you're going to see how this changes. And what it's going to do is essentially going to take all of the different materials and textures that exist on each of these squares and then export them into their own file. And then when I bring them into Rhino, it'll be able to utilize that data and bring it in correctly. So if we look here, I'm just going to now open up my Python script, and I'm just going to copy and paste it into here, and then I'm going to hit enter. And you'll see that this has actually changed my texture, and it's now creating new textures. So in order to now ensure that we export those textures correctly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file first of all. I'm going to save it in the Blender, and I'm going to call it Manchester MSA, for example. I'm going to save as. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, and I'm going to go to External Data, and I'm going to make sure this is selected. First of all, I'm going to go to External Data and Unpack Resources. And it's going to ask me where we want to unpack them to the file, and it will unpack those resources into a new file. And if I just open up that file where I've saved those to in my desktop, I'll just open up the Blender file, and we'll see that we have this folder called textures, and it's exported all of the different textures out from there. Okay, perfect. So now that those textures are exported, we're now ready to export this file as an FBX. So I'm going to File, Export, and FBX. And I'm going to call it the same as the main file, and I'm going to go to Textures. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I go into the Textures file, and I'm going to go Selected Objects just from here, and I'm going to go Z up, and I'm going to export the FBX. Perfect. We're ready now to open up Rhino 3D. So I'm going to open up a session of Rhino. This is a file that I created already to ensure that it's working. And I'm just going to open a new Rhino file. So while that loads up, I'm going to make sure that everything is looking the way that it should. And I'm going to make sure that we just close the other session of Rhino that's running. And I'm going to open up my new session of Rhino just here. And I'm going to go File, and I'm going to open it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go New, and I'm going to do Large Objects Centimeters, because the way that this file exports is as centimeters. I'm going to go File, Import, and I'm going to go find my file that I created, which is on my desktop. I'll go my documents, sorry. I'll go Blender, I'll go Textures, and it's Manchester MSA. And then because we already did the FBX Y to Z, we don't need to do that. I can click OK, and then give it a second to import. And then once it's imported, we'll see something that looks like this. Okay, which isn't too exciting right now because it's just the mesh, but the magic will really happen is when we go into rendered mode. And if I just go File, I'm just going to go and open my previous one, which is File. I'm just go do this file, import. I'll try the Manchester one. And there we go. Yeah, okay, perfect. So we don't really see anything when this is downloaded, but when we go to rendered mode, we start to see that we get more detail from our file. And then I can start to play around with this, and I can model it, and I can use some of the details that are in here to get more accurate information. If I want to model the actual carriageway in its actual correct position, I can do so. I can get some more terrain here, and I can start to utilize this data in Rhino. And I can also start to play around, create massing, and so on. And in order to start to utilize this file, I need to really understand what it is that I want to utilize it for. And so, you know, if I just want to do massing and show, I can use OSM data, because this is now coming as a mesh, and it's actually not a very nice looking mesh when you go out of it. There's always certain information that we can extract from here. So it's really important that the information that we bring in, we understand the information we bring in is not going to give us a lot of 3D files that we can work with, but it's going to give us data that we can work with if I want to then start modeling myself. So for example, because these come in squares, I can take, you know, if I wanted to just model this, I can isolate that selection by clicking isolate, and then I can go to rendered mode and I can see this just here. And I can start to then use this if I wanted to model this part of the highway as a reference information that I can then start to model over. Okay. The other thing that I can do here, if I just go back for a moment, and I'm just going to go back and just go back to shaded mode. I can also bring in my OSM data. So I can go file and import. And again, this time I'm going to use my, I'm going to change this down here. I'm going to go to all supported file types, and we should have our OBJ file. And then I can specify what I want to import the OBJ groups as. So I can do them as layers, and I can import OBJ groups as groups or layers. I can do them as layers. It's up to me. And then I can also specify if I want to map the OBJY to Rhino Z, which I already did when I exported it, so I don't need to do that. And what I can do is then click OK, and it will bring in my OBJ file that I can then use. Okay, so I can use this information now, which gives me quite accurate information, to then help me to model my site. Do ZEA, zoom extents all, and then I can start to specify this information here. Okay. So that's a very quick way that I can utilize Blender OSM and bring that data into here. Now, if I wanted to create a new file, because this is now a mesh, if I click on it, it tells me what it is up here. It's one open mesh. So let's say I wanted to create this as NURBS. So if I just do mesh to NURB, you're going to see that it's not going to be very clean. And it's going to be just like lots and lots of NURBS faces, just like little squares. I don't want that. I want something a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this face and I'm going to explode it. I'm going to use this top mesh face, and I can go and type patch. And if I click preview on, it's going to give me a preview of what that patch looks like, and it's going to go beyond this, the outside of the mesh, but that's okay because I just want to just map this on. And you'll see also as I start to increase the number of U spans, for example, I click preview again, it will update in my file here. So I know that this way is the U direction and this way is going to be the V direction. So that's going to be more like 40 if I just click preview, maybe even less, like 20. Click preview, and that's like a similar size now. If I wanted to get more detail in there, the more faces that I put on there, the more that they'll come down here. And then what I can do is in my V spans, I can do like 50, for example, click preview, and we'll get something that's closer to my original geometry. Now, the more numbers that I put in here, the closer it's going to get to the original surface. So I'm just going to do 40 and 60 and click OK. And now it's created this. So what I can now do is go in my top view, and I can use a rectangle, and I can draw that out. I can select my rectangle and go back to my perspective, or I can do it in the top view, and I can type trim. And I'm going to just trim that away. Okay, I'm just going to drag this this surface out just so you can see my progress that I've made. And what I'm going to do as well is actually I'm going to take the curve that was created and the surface, and I'm just going to drag those to the right so you can see these. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just bring this curve up and I'm going to extrude it, and I can drag it downwards, and I can select my face and type trim, and I can trim away this top face, and now I can join these together into a piece of geometry that is now NURBS, and it's a site terrain that I can laser cut, 3D print, because it's watertight. So that's how we can extract meshes and then create NURBS surfaces from them. We can follow a similar logic to the buildings if we want. And a very quick way that we can do that is we should have our buildings in layers. If they're not in layers, then what's happened is it's brought these in as colors and it's put them all on the default layer. So I can put them onto my own layers, and we just need to make sure that when we export them, that we export them the correct way. So I can put them onto my own layers. For example, if I had a buildings layer, I could create the buildings layer. And because I've created these meshes now, I could go and right click over here, and with them selected, I can change the object layer. And what it'll do is if I just turn that off, you'll see that those buildings are on that layer. And these buildings are in a different layer. So if we want them all to be on the same layer, then we can select them, and it'll select all of the other buildings that are also in that same layer. And I can just click over here and just select all of the different meshes, and then I can go right click over here and change objects layer, and it's going to bring those over. I'm still missing a couple, so I'm going to just right click over here, change objects layer. So now those buildings are on the buildings object layer. So if I turn that back on, you see those. If I turn it off, they're just there. So this is my site. Now I can put that onto the site layer if I want to, and just say change object layer, double click on here and call it site. I can start to just build up some hierarchy like that and just keep turning stuff off. Okay, so one of the other things that I can do is I can take, let's say I've got these roads and I really don't like the way that they are looking on here, and I don't really like how things are behaving. What I can do is I can start to clean up these roads if I want to just get cleaner roads, and I'll show you how we can do that. So I'm going to take my NURBS that I created, I'm going to just copy it across to the corner here. I'm going to make sure that I get the corner to corner. So I'm going to go move it to there, to there. So now I've got this. So I'm just going to turn off my site really quick. And I'm just going to do it with some of the main roads. So we've got a few different types of road. We've got like the carriageway, then we've got the primary roads, and then the secondary roads, and then like the tertiary roads. But if I wanted to do them all just as roads, what I can do is I can just select all of these different roads, and I can just click on them. Because they're grouped together in their meshes, we can just select all of those. and then I've selected all of the roads. If I want to select something that has the same color, I can do that by using my selection tools here. There's this little icon here. If I drag that, I can select by layer, anything on the same layer, but also I can select by color. So I can select anything that has the same color. So what I've done now is I've selected everything that has that dark gray color. And what I can do now is I can create like a roads layer. And I can then move all of those across by right clicking, change object layer. And if I just go back and turn the roads off, now the roads are all on that layer. I'll make sure that my terrain, all these terrains are on the terrain layer or the site layer. And then I'm just going to do change object layer. And now the terrain's just there on the site. Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just turn my site off just for a moment. And I'm going to utilize just the roads layer. So if I want to select just the roads, what I can do is I can go here and just select, but that will select everything. If I do select by layer, I can go to roads and click on roads and click, I'll just do it again, roads, and then click OK, and it'll select everything that's on the roads layer. And a little trick that I've got for you, I don't know why that one's gone onto here, so I'm just going to go put this and move that onto the site layer, change objects layer. Okay, I'll do that again. So cell, and I can even type cell layer. I can select the roads layer, I can click OK, and it's going to select all of the roads. Now I'm going to on my top view. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to type make 2D. And it's going to bring up some functions that allow me to make a two-dimensional view of this mesh. And because it's meshes and they're not very clean, what I can do is I'm just going to create a new roads layer. And when I do the make 2D, I'm going to turn hidden lines off, and I'm going to do view, and I'm going to do group output. We can do scene silhouette if we want to, but it won't make a big difference. And we can click, if I want to group the output, I can. I'm not going to group the output. I'll just click OK, and it's going to create now new roads layer. Okay. So we now have these different roads. Now, one of the issues that we now face is that we have a lot of lines, and this could be problematic because, you know, in order for me to clean these up, what I'd have to do is click trim and just start going in and like deleting all these lines one at a time. It's going to be very, very tedious. I have a really fast way that we can do this and do this cleanup. And in order to do that, what I need to do is I need to create a profile around this site. In fact, what I'll do is I'm going to turn on the site, because this is the one that I actually want. Let me make sure that I get all these. Okay, now that'll be okay. So I'm just going to go back. I'm going to go forwards and just show you. So I'm going to use cell layer. I'm going to choose the roads layer, click OK, and then type make 2D. I'm going to make the roads 2D, and then click, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a rectangle just around the outside. And it doesn't really matter where I draw it right now, because you'll see what I'm going to do with this in a moment. Okay, so what I can do now is I can select all of these lines, and there's a really cool command called curve boolean. So curve CRV boolean, or curve boolean. And what this allows me to do is I can select inside objects and then another object, and it'll create a curve around the outside of whatever I've selected. Okay, so I can do it with the roads, for example. But again, that's going to be quite a long-winded way of doing it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go here, and I'm actually going to select the inverse. I'm going to select these areas, the larger areas where I have big openings, like so. And that's where I'm going to select, because there's much fewer and then I'll get my road and path outlines from doing this. So I'll just select inside here, and it's just going to select all of the different areas. If I just keep going, and it's going to create a profile curve of all of these different areas that I've selected. Perfect. Okay, almost done. So now you see that I've practically finished all of that. I'm going to select this one, this one, and this one. And I can even go inside here as well if I want to. And now what you see, I've created a profile of all of the roads. Now if I hit enter, you're going to see, if I just drag this out, I have really clean outline curves that I can then use. Okay, so what I could do now is, I'm just going to demonstrate this to you just so you can see. If I take my site profile, it's going to go in the top view. So this is my site profile now. And I'm just going to take these curves that I created and I'm going to group them together just so that they remain together. And I'm going to create a new layer where I'm going to say roads, curves, and they're my cleaned up road curves. I'm going to select this, I'm going to right click on there, and I'm going to go to change objects layer. Okay. Now, if I turn my roads layer back on, I can just bring this over here. And I'm just going to go and click M for move. And I'm going to select one of these corners. I'm just going to select this corner here and then line it up to this corner here. And I might need to turn on some of my snapping tools. Let's see what I've got. Intersect. I'm just going to put that one there. I'll do it again. And I'll just go and get it as close as I can to my actual outline. Okay. So now I've created that curve outline. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just isolate this selection. So I'm going to select those curves and I'm going to select just my site. So I can select the site from here. I can select those curves there. And I'm going to type isolate. And what that will do is it will isolate my selection. Because now what I can do is I can take this surface, and I can either project down onto this surface or I can cut it. But before I do that, I'm just going to explode this. So I'm just cutting through the top section. And I'm going to select this face and I'm going to type split. And then I'm going to use my curves that I've created and press enter. And it's going to calculate for a moment. And it's going to project those downwards and it's going to cut them out. So now you have something that looks like this. I'm just going to hide those road curves so you can see. So now I have this. Okay, these are cut out on my actual site topography. And then what I can do is I can go back to my roads layer, right click, change objects layer, and now I've created roads on the site in a much cleaner way. So if I type unisolate now, I'll go back to my file. I'm just slowly building this up. And we've got all cleaned up roads. If I just select all of these guys for a second. And what I could do is, if I wanted to clean this up even further, I could create 2 layer types. And the first one I'm going to do is meshes. And the second one that I'm going to do is NURBS. So I can put all my meshes in one layer structure and I can put all my NURBS in the other. So what I can do is I can type cell mesh, and that will select all of my meshes and I can move them to the meshes. But if I want to move them by their necessary layers, I just need to create some sub layers. So I'll create a new sub layer and I'll call this one roads. because I'm going to put all my mesh roads in there. And then I'll create another layer inside there. I'll call that buildings, for example. And then another layer that I can call green. And another one, I'm just in here, that I call site, or I call it terrain. I'll call that one terrain. I'll just move that into the meshes. So what I can do now is if I want to just select meshes, I can go over here to the filters and I can turn on, if I right click on meshes, it'll only turn meshes on. And if I do cell layer now, if I select the original roads layer and click OK, it's only going to select the meshes. Because I've put a filter on, it's only going to select meshes that are in that layer. So what I can do now is I can go to my meshes layer and I can change the object layer and turn it off. Okay, then I can do the same again with the others. So this is my site terrain, for example. I can just select that and I can go to terrain and just right click and change object layer. I could also do it here, select the mesh, right click over here on terrain, change object layer, then turn it off. Perfect. So this is how I can start to build up my files now, and I can start to play around just building up my different geometry. Perfect. So this is how we can start to clean up our file. It's how we can start to then model things in a more clean way using the OSM data that I brought out of Blender, and also I can then use this as a reference point to then bring my FBX file also and start to then really start to change the way that this looks by using both files at the same time, and I can really start to then work into this this file in much more detail. So once we've done that with the roads, what we can then do is we can do the same thing with our buildings. For example, so right now we have all the buildings as meshes. So what I could do is I can select all of that layer, and if I go to select layer, press enter, and I can select all of the buildings. And then the next step that I can take is I can just go to my NURBS here, and I'm just going to create some sublayers again, and I can say the same. Just create buildings, and create another one, which is going to be terrain, and then another one, which is going to be roads, and then another one, which is going to be the green spaces, for example. Okay, so now I have these buildings selected. What I can now do is go over here to my meshes and change the object layer. So now they're in the meshes layer. But what I want to do now is I want to turn these into NURBS. If I want to turn them into NURBS, what I can do is I can just say to NURB. What that will do is it will turn the mesh into NURBS. In fact, I'll use mesh to NURB because that'll probably be, well, I'll do two NURBS for now and just see whether that works. And press enter. And if I just turn off my meshes buildings, it'll be on the same layer. So let me just go back a second. So what I'm going to do is select all of those again. Just do cell layer. I'm going to select all of the buildings. Click OK. Do that again. I think it's in the buildings, in meshes, because I moved it. So then what I'm going to do is type to NURBS once I've moved my active layer to the NURBS. And I'm going to now type to NURBS. Just make sure I select two NURBS. Press enter. Then I can turn off the mesh buildings. I'll try this again. So I'll turn off my filter. So I'll do cell last, and it's 10 poly surfaces added to the selection, so it shows that the NURBs have actually worked. And then I'm going to right click on here and then change object layer. So I'll just turn off the mesh buildings. Yeah, there we go. So now I have lots of NURB buildings, but if you see that a lot of these faces are actually not very clean. The vertical ones have actually come out really clean, because what they've done is just taken a single mesh face and it's created into a single NURB space. In certain areas, like here on the roof, we have lots and lots of NURB faces. So in order to fix that, what I can do is I can just select the roof and I can type merge all coplanar faces and press enter. And what it'll do is it'll just merge all of those faces into really nice clean faces. Do the same over here. A little tip as well, if I just go back, is what I can do is I can select a face, and then if I just right click my mouse button one time, it will run the last command. So that's just a really fast way of being able to do that. So just right click, run the last command. Select, run right click, it'll run last command. Select, run right click, it'll run the last command. Perfect. Great. So now I have all of these faces. And if you look here, if I just, I'm just going to join this back together. I'm going to join that back together and I'm going to hide it. And I'm just going to go back again. So I'll select that one. Now select this one. And I'm just holding shift while I select. And I'm just going to hit join. Do that again. And I could also drag a box just all the way across and I'll select all of them. Join. And then I'll hide it. Perfect. So if you see underneath here, the other thing that I could do is if I just turn the sight off, you'll see that these are not capped off at the bottom. So one of the things that I could do is, if I wanted to, I could just delete these, and because I have these closed regions, I could delete all of the roofs just there, and that one doesn't work quite as well. So I'm going to keep those. And what I could do is I could select all of these faces, and if I just type cap one time, it's going to cap off all of these faces. Now it's going to cap the top and the bottom. And so that is one now closed solid. And I can do the same here, cap. And I can try and do the same here and see if this will work. Yeah, it seems like that works pretty well. I could do the same here, do the same here. And these guys, I'm not sure what's going on with these guys, but they're getting quite interesting. So I've got quite a few faces over here that are like intersecting one another. I'm just going to ungroup these. Just type ungroup. And let me just try and explode it. And then I'll join it back together. It should now have exploded them out of that group. So now these are individual faces. So what I can do now is see where these are intersecting one another. And if I just hit delete on that, select that and hit cap, I can start to just delete away any intersecting faces. I believe that this one is also intersecting. It's not that one. If I isolate it, I can see what's happening. You see that not all of these faces have come. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select both. I'm just going to select all of it. I'm just going to isolate that selection just so I can see what's going on here. So if I type cap, this one's not capping because there's something happening with the openings. And so what I could do is try to join them together, and then what I could do is extrude that surface down, and we still have some openings. So, and it's because that one there. So this one isn't capping off. So let me just do one command. I'm going to do a Boolean union. That failed. So just delete away any surfaces. I'm going to explode this. What I'm going to try and do is see if I can just clean this up. So we have some duplicate faces, it looks like. And if I run the cell dupe command, it will show me where the duplicate faces are. So what I can do is I can go through and just start to delete any duplicate faces. So we've got no more duplicates, which is good. I can just start to clean this up. Just see, yeah, there's quite a few that are intersecting. Just here, just get rid of these. It's going to merge all the coplanar faces. And to make sure that there's no difficult faces in there. And then what I can do is I can just delete away some of these ones. I'm just going to take away all the internal faces. Just keep the outside ones. And you'll see this in a moment is going to give me. So if I ensure that I leave certain faces, so that when I run my command, what you're going to see happen here is I need to keep certain faces. So let me just check these. Just going to delete the bottom faces. And any internal faces that are there. And then I'll just trim away some as well. So I can trim some of these ones away. A few of the internal ones. I'm just basically trying to create like a single mass. I can start to then loft some of these faces here, like so. So I can loft that one. That one's going to be tricky to loft. I can loft these ones. Should. And I should be able to also, if I just take some of these faces and I'm gonna, so I should be able to lock this one. And as long as I leave an opening there, what I can do is I should be able to loft this one. I should be able to loft this one. And wherever I've left an opening, so I should be able to loft this one to this one. So I'm not going to do that one. What I am going to do is I'm going to do split face. And I'm going to take that face there and I'm going to draw a line from there to there. It's an open poly surface, so I need to explode it. So now I'm going to split face. Select this one and I'm going to go across there. Press enter. Didn't like that, so I'm just going to draw. If I just draw a line there, what I can do is I'm going to run the split command. I can select this one. So I'll make sure that this do is I'll just copy this across just for a moment because it doesn't like that. You see, this is where it's starting to misbehave, just here. So yeah, we can see that that's not exactly what we want. I'll just join those together and I just hit cap. So it's enabled to cap 23 objects. So another way that I could do this is I could take this, I explode these faces, and I could just select the top faces. So anything that's at the top here. Okay, so I select all of the top faces. And then if I do extrude surface, it's going to go down. And then I'm going to select all of those. I'm going to make sure that when I do that actually, so if I just run that command again, when I do that, I just need to hit cap on them. It's going to cap them all off. Now what I'm going to do is select all of those faces that I just extruded, and I'm going to do a Boolean union. It should join them together. If it fails, it's because something's not intersecting the way it should be. So it's showing me there that it's not. That's fine, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in the front view. I'll go in the right view, and I'm going to run a command called wirecut. So let me just make sure that I've got everything. Okay, I'm going to go in the right view. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to run a command called wirecut. I need to select a polyline. So I'll do that again. Wirecut. Press enter. Select the cutting curve. Press enter. Set the objects to cut, which is going to be all these. Press enter. And then what I can do is I can choose both sides. I can run that along there, and then I can bring it down. And essentially, it's going to cut away everything that was below that, just like a wire cutter. So now I've been able to create solid objects. So if I just do cell surf and just hit delete, I'll delete all of those, but I don't want to delete these front ones. I'm just going to deselect those from my selection by using control, and then I can hit delete. It's going to delete all the surfaces away that were singular surfaces. So that's a way that I can start to just build up that mass. If I go and isolate now, we have this guy here. It's going to keep my, and then I can select that, and I can go over to my buildings layer. It's already in the buildings layer. I can just change the color to the orange and hit OK. And now we have that. If all of them, not all of them, are changed to the correct color, we just need to go to the properties over here, and we need to do display color by layer, and then it should display the color by the layer. And say with these guys, it's got a custom color on there. If you just do it by layer, it should change to by layer. Perfect. So this is just one way that we can just start to clean up. Now there are other ways to get a model like this in Rhino data. I'm just showing you how we can take meshes and actually make them into NURBS surfaces. So it's quite a comprehensive workflow. Again, we have some meshes here for the green spaces, and if I want to just move those, I can go to my layers, and I could go to my meshes green, and then change object layer, and then turn that off, and then it starts to show me. And if I just turn my site back on, so we've got site here, and if I do show selected, I can just start to turn these back on as well. Okay, so I can then start to play around with some of the green spaces. So if I want that to be a green space, I can make this a green space. Let me just check these guys. Looks like some of them didn't cut when I ran the split command, and then some of them also, which are roads, didn't appear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the outline there. Let me just hide this a second, and then I can see that there's quite a few roads on here. So I'm just going to select these roads and just put them on the correct layer. And then same with these ones here and that one. I'm just going to make sure that they're on the correct layer. Go over to roads, and I'll just do change object layer. And then we can change the color of this as well to whatever color our roads are. So if I want like that purple color, I can use the purple color. And then these guys are also here. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to change object layer, remove those to the NURBS roads. It looks like these guys didn't cut through, so that right now is an open mesh. So what I could do is, because these are green areas, what I could do is go in the top view. I could do make 2D and just take that view that we have. And what we need to do now is, in a similar way to the way I did the other items, what I need to do now is I'll just select this near the corner. I'll just move this from this corner down here. When by the intersect. I'll move it to this corner here, so I know that they're in the same spot. I'm just going to move this guy across for a moment, and I'm going to do curve boolean. I'll select this outline. I'm going to select in there, and now I have those curves. I can group them together, and I can move them to the road curves layer, change objects layer, turn that layer on. And again, what I can do is move this across because I know that it should line up. And if it doesn't, what I can do is, notice it does line up, but it's just slightly off there. I can just move it to there. And that has my curves now. And what I can now do is, if I just move this up a second, and I'm going to turn on my the site layer, so show selected. I'm going to turn this on. Great, and then I'm going to do cell layer. I'm just going to select the site, click OK. And then I'm going to just isolate that selection just so I can see what's going on. Okay, so it's actually the roads that I'm going to need to cut through, because yeah, it's actually the roads layer that I need. So if I do show selected, I can select the roads that I have, and I can turn the site off. Okay, perfect. So now I'll go in the top. I'll just check this. See, in some instances, it's not actually, I don't need to cut these ones down here. It's just these up here and these here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ungroup that. And I'm just going to select the curves that I need to use to cut through each of these, and I can drag a box around these ones. Perfect. And now I'm just going to group those together because they're the only ones that I need to cut. So I'm just going to select the roads, and I'm going to type split, and I'm going to now select the curves and press enter, and I'll do cell last. So what I'll do is I'll just hide those ones, and then I'll just select these, and I'm going to put them now into the green layer, and then make it green so we can actually see it. Okay, great. So now I do show selected, and bring those back. Or I can just type show, and that'll bring everything back. Okay, now if I turn the site on, great. So it's just about building these up, just one at a time. I'm just going to move these across to the side. So I've still got them, but so now I need to work my way through the models here. So these are open meshes. If I want to check which layer they're on, right now they're on the default layer. So I'm just going to move them over here to the green layer, right click, change objects layer. Perfect. And if we turn that off, it'll turn that off. If I want to turn it back on, I can turn it back on. If I want to just be able to see, which areas that I want to make into greenery. It looks like there was another one as well, actually, over here. We need to get the boundary of this one. Oh, did it work? Yeah, it worked. Or it should work. Okay, for some reason it only brought those ones. It didn't bring those ones. So what I could do here is me just see if I can get this. I can duplicate the mesh. So duplicate mesh edge. Let me just see if I can get the whole thing. It might be a little bit tricky to do that. So looks like these ones didn't work. So I could do, go back in the top view. I can do make 2D and select these. That'll also bring these ones out. And then I can bring this one, the corner there, to this corner here, and that should work. Perfect. So now I can do curve boolean, and I can select the side here. I can get the edges that I want. I can move that just using this to the corner there. Just going to bring that up just so I can see it. I'm going to group that together. And then I'm going to select my road. I'm going to type split. I'm going to select these curves, press enter, and now in principle that should work perfect. So I'm just going to turn these meshes off and I'm going to select these faces that I've just cut, and I'm going to move those to the green layer, change objects layer, and now they should be on there. So this is how we can just work through and just start building up our model and our meshes. So we have a few curves here that we've been using to cut things. We can just move these across. We can keep them up until the point that we don't need them anymore. We can always keep them in the file. They're not going to make a huge difference to the file. If I want to align them, I can either just drag and then let it pop at 0 and it'll just align them all. Okay, great. So that's how we can work through a model like this. Now, if I wanted to sort of add a lot more detail, I can, and this is where using the FBX model can come in quite handy as well. And we can do some more intricate modeling, but that is going to be a little bit more time consuming and take a little bit more effort. But that's how we can use our OBJ to start to model this. Like I say, there is ways that we can bring OSM data straight into Rhino. What I wanted to show you there is if we have mesh files, how we can turn them into NURBS files quite quickly and quite easily. So the next thing that we're going to do, if I just move this across, I'm just going to move this across as well. We have this file. So if I save it, I can save that file. And if I just import my FBX file, so file, let's just go here, file, and just make sure that I have it saved correctly. So this is my FBX file. Remember, I just go to file, export FBX, make sure that it's saved to the textures file. Make sure I do selected and Z is up, export the file. And then we'll try and open that file that we've created and click import. I'm going to go back, Blender, textures, and it's OBJ down here. If it's OBJ, we need to click on supported files. Then we can bring in our FBX file. Then we can click OK. It should bring in our FBX file. So you'll see that that's significantly larger than our other file. And that's because the OBJ scaled when we brought it in. Let me just make sure that this is rendered. Yeah, there we go, perfect. So this is rendered now the way it should be. And we have all of our files, all of our different meshes. which is great. But before we do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure this and just see, just to get an idea. So if I measure the distance, so that's 25 centimeters. Yeah, so this is scaled. So if we want to scale it up, we can just type scale, press enter. I can go from the corner there, and I'm going to scale it by 10. Sorry, I'm going to scale it by 1,000 because it needs to be 1,000. So I'll do that again. There we go. Let's see if that works. So I'll move that across, and then I'll go File, Import again, and then bring this in. Okay, so I needed to only scale it by 100. So I'm just going to go back again. And then this time I'm going to do ZEA, zoom extents all. And then I'm going to go to the corner. I'm going to do 100 this time. There we go. Let's see if this works. Now go File, Import, FBX, and click OK. And there we go. Perfect. So that's the correct size. So what I'm going to just do is I'm just going to hide this for the moment, because I'm going to just focus on this model that I brought in now. And what I can do is create a new layer. I'm going to make sure that that layer sits outside of these sublayers. So let me just, I can just move it down to here. I double click, and I'm just going to say Google tiles. I can select all of those. There's something over here, but I don't know, I'm not sure what it is. It's all part of it. So I'm then just going to go right click and change object layer. Perfect. So now I have these Google tiles as their own separate layer. But one important thing now is just to clean some of these layers up. I'm just gonna go here, and then if I type purge in Rhino, it'll bring up things that I can purge. I'm just going to go to layers and click OK, and I'll just get rid of any layers that don't have anything in it. So it'll just clean up my file. And now let me see if there's anything in the, I'm sure there's my site layer. I'm just going to make sure. Close the poly surface. Yeah, that's my poly surface. Okay, I can send these and just hide them. Or another alternative is I can go up here and just start to hide them, hide the different layers. And then anything that isn't on a layer, I can then see. And I can select these. And I'll just move these to the road curves layer. And then we have some water here. So I could, in my meshes, create a new layer. Call it water. And then just right click and change the object layer. So now I've got that. We've got one of these buildings. So I'm just going to go to my NURBS building, change object layer. Okay, so we've just cleaned those up. So now all we're left with is our FBX file, which is our Google tiles. And so if I go into rendered mode, you're going to see, I can see the textures on these quite nicely, and it gives me quite a lot of information now. And I can start to use this information to just add more detail to my models. So for example, the amount of detail that I get from here is much richer than the detail that I would get from just downloading an OSM file, because I get textures, I get actual road sizes, I get the heights of the carriageway and the different intricacies like here, where it starts to go under and create a tunnel, and over in these places where you just wouldn't get that kind of rich information on the OSM maps, and like the railway station and the heights of the bridge and so on. And then we can start to use that information. So one of the key things to do here is just ensure that when we're working with this file, is that the file, if we just go to default, I'm just going to lock it. So by locking it, I can't select anything on that file. So if I lock it, I can't select anything, which is really, really useful. Then when I come to create, let's say, the bridge, I can then start working into this file. Or if I want to start drawing this carriageway, I can again start drawing the carriageway, or this carriageway, or this road, and I can start drawing it in my own way. So I know that this road here, for example, gives me quite a lot of information. So I've got two carriageways, but then those two carriageways then merge into another two exit ramps or entrance ramps. It's the same here, and then they merge around this way, and they merge again to other carriageways. So I know the general profile of something like this. So what I can do is a quick way that I could start to model that. There's a couple of ways that we could model that, but one of them that I found the most useful for this kind of exercise is actually using sub-D. And because I've got a basic idea of what this profile might look like, what I can do is essentially I can just I can go in my front view for a second. I'm just going to go, let's just go in perspective. Here we go. So we've got a cut through here, what this carriageway looks like. And so I can start to use that information to my advantage. So here we've got like an idea of what that looks like just there. So essentially what I could do now is just I could take some curves, and if I make sure that my if I go here, make sure that knot and point is turned on and vertex, and then my my cursor will snap then to those points, and I can just start to draw and snap to these points here. So I'm just going to snap to the vertex points, and I'm not going to be too particular about it just at this moment. I'm just going to try and create a profile. I've created a basic profile now. Okay. So the problem with my profile right now is just not very clean, or it's not very, doesn't look very nice. So with a little bit of cleanup, I could clean this up. So essentially I could just start to push and pull some of these down and then move that across and start to then work into this to make it a little bit cleaner. And so it's I could take different edges, for example, when I've drawn them, and I can align them just by scaling them. I can either scale them down, or I can do something called set PT. Set PT. where I set the point, I go in the Z axis, click OK, and then what this will do is it'll start to push these points down. And I could also, scale them the other way as well if I want to, and move that up. So I can start to create a profile. Now don't worry too much about this being perfect. Just right now, all we're doing is just creating a basic profile for ourselves. And then what we can do is I can go to sub D, and we can start to utilize this by extruding the curve. And I'm just going to do it straight just for now. And I can just create a profile, something like that. So this is now a sub D face, and if I hit tab, it's going to go to my unsubdivided mode and my subdivided mode. Okay. So now I can essentially just move this, go in the top view, move this into place. Just there. If I just let it just sit above it, just for now, just so I can see it more accurately. I can go into the top view, and because this is locked, I'm not going to select any of that. I can go into my sub D tools now, and I can select the edges. So I can go to the edges here, and I can start to move them around. Okay, and then if I hold, let me just go back, select these edges, and if I hold Control as I drag, I can now start to drag this road down into place. And you'll see at different points, it might move up and down. All I'm going to worry about right now is just making sure that I follow the profile of the road as best I can. So if it starts to move up, I can just move it up with my gumball, like so. I can go back to the top view, and I can start to there. I can hold Control and then start to drag again until the next point that it curves. It's really important that I only do this to the points where it starts to deviate and curve. I'm going to go up again, just ever so slightly. And then I'm going to go back to my top view. And again, I'm just going to go back to the next point that it starts to deviate. So if it starts to go too far and move, then I've gone too far. So I need to just go as far as I start to see that it's keeping its profile as close to the road as possible. Okay, and then I'll do Control again and go this way. Then I'll do Control again and go this way. I do Control again, go this way. I do Control again, go this way. Perfect. Now I've created a nice looking carriageway. And it really is just about building up from there. And if you've created a nice profile, what we can do is we can start to then play around with it. And there might be certain areas that we want to scale it, for example. So if it goes wider in certain areas, we can start to scale it. And we can even turn on, if I just go back to shading mode for a second, we can select the edges that we've already created, and we can scale those if the carriageway goes wider in certain areas. And we could just start to build up our model in this way. So if I hold tab and tab again, I can start to see I've created this nice profile. Now, the nicer the profile that we create, the more detail that we're going to get out of it in the end. This was just a very quick way of showing you. So if you add more detail to the profile before we extrude it, we can start to play around with it like that. So that's one way that we can create carriageways. And you can follow a similar process even for these other areas, the other roads that we create. And the other beautiful thing is that when we've created sub D, is let's say, for example, I go here and I want to now bring some roads out like that, or I want to bring these, the carriageway out. What essentially I can do is I can go in my top view, And I'm just going to select this object, and I'm going to show you a trick where what I can do is if I go to sub D tools and just turn all my filters off, and the filters are over here to the left. When I turn my sub D filters on, it's just essentially just allowing me to select curves or faces or vertices. But if I turn that off, it will just turn off all my filters. So then what I can do now is I can select this object that I've created, and I can go over here to the properties, and I can change the properties there. So I can keep the background rendered, for example, but I can change the display properties of my sub D so I can see it shaded, and then I can see these curves. Okay, so now I have this this line here, and what I can do is I can go to my sub D tools, and I can insert another loop here, because this is where I want to start pulling this out. And the way that I can do that is by inserting another loop. So I can select this edge loop, and I can then just insert another loop here. Or another way I can do it is if I select that edge loop, I can also bevel it, and what it'll do is it'll introduce another curve to the side. I'm just going to go in tab. I'm just going to hit tab when I do that. I'm just going to insert another edge loop, which is fairly close to that one. And now what I can do is if I go, I'm just going to go back to the top. In fact, I'll go to perspective just for a moment. I'll change it to rendered mode. I'm going to go back to this guy over here, and I'm going to make sure that these objects, this object is, the display mode is shaded, so I can see this guy here. Okay, so now what I can do is take these faces that I have, and what I'll need to do is select those faces, and again holding control, I can start to drag these out. I can rotate it. If I just turn ortho off, I can then rotate it, and I can just hit tab just so I can start to see what this is going to look like, and then I can hit control and just start to drag it out like so, and you see I can start to drag this out. Okay, so what I need to do now is I'll need to figure a way to take this inner face just there. Same with this face here. And I'll use the extrude command to take them down. And that's just here. Type extrude. I can start to move these down. And let me just turn off I'll just disable my snaps just for now, because I don't want it to snap. And I want to just be able to control this. Introduce new geometry. If I just hit tab, it'll give me a better idea of what that looks like. And if I'm not happy with it, essentially what I could do is I could take another edge loop. I can go in here, select these. Sorry, I can select this edge here. I could just start to draw an edge loop there, draw another edge loop here, start to create the profile that I want. So I'll create like a holding edge, and then I can take these faces here. I'm not too happy with this part here, but we'll fix that, because what I could do is I'm just going to take these faces for now, and we'll fix that one in a moment. And then I can extrude down. I can start to push it down. See, it's going to extrude UV. I'm going to go just like directly down, and I can start to then push it. And if we model in unsubdivided mode, it's just much easier to work with. Now this is problematic because I want to get a curve here on this corner and a curve around this corner, just so it starts, so I can make this curve happen here. So the way that I'll fix that is, again, I just need to introduce another edge loop. So I can draw an edge loop here, and I can just draw one there, and just get another one. I just draw another one there, and then what I can start to do is take these faces here and just delete them. So I'm going to delete those. Now I can start to play around with these and merge them together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my vertices, and let me just find, I'm going to take this one here and this one here. And I can type stitch, which is like that. And what it'll do is it'll stitch that edge to that vertex to that vertex. And it's just this command here, stitch. Okay. So I can stitch edges. So I could take the edge, this edge, and then this edge. And I can run the stitch command, and it's going to stitch them together. Just like so. I can do the same here, this one and this one. I can run the stitch command, and it's going to stitch them together. Perfect. What I want it to happen here is I don't want it to be this square. I want it to actually be, if I just press escape, I'm just going to grab the vertex there. I'm just going to push it up a little bit. I actually want to now stitch these together, because I actually don't want to keep, because what's going to happen is, you're going to see when this happens, we're going to get this curvature happening here, and I want it to just be a little bit more pronounced. But that's how I can start to work with sub D. But I'm also going to get like this sharp corner here, because I've introduced more geometry. So I'm going to get rid of some of that geometry. And the way that I do that is, again, very simply, just by going to edge mode. I'm going to just select these guys. I'm going to select this guy and this guy, and I'm going to stitch them together. I'm just going to move that across. Okay. And we just need to make sure that we're just cleaning up as we go through. So again, this is not ideal. So we shouldn't have triangles. We should always work with quads. So again, if I just stitch these together, again, I'm just going to start cleaning this up. So again, I can go there, and I'm going to stitch it together. And then I'm going to go here. I can choose the edge, this edge to this edge. I'm going to stitch them together. Perfect. And with this one, I can actually just delete that away now. I can just hit delete. I don't want it. And I can do the same with this one. And I'll delete it that way. And what I can do with this is, if I don't want to have this as like a sharp corner, what I can do is I can take this edge here, and I can start to just open it up. I'll just use the edge, and I can just start to open it up by moving it down, and it'll just soften this edge here. And I can do the same. I can do the same here. If I just select the whole thing, what I'm going to do is I can slide this edge. So I can use slide mesh edge, and I can start to slide it if I want to. Or if I just select which faces I want to slide, I can slide different mesh edges, you know, along the faces. So I can just take these three here, for example, this one, this one. I'll just do those for now, and that one. I can just slide that just up that way, just to keep the shape. I can do the same here. Take this one and this one, and just slide it. And I just start to then open up this edge again, so it softens it up. Okay, so using sub-D, we can start to create some really interesting more organic modeling that helps us to model sort of more difficult things like this. Okay, so that's how we can start to work into a file like this using sub-D. And if it's more organic, you know, like a road, it's still going to have a degree of hard surface to it. So it's really important that when we're modeling, if we want to start sharpening edges off, what we can do is we could select an edge, and I can either introduce more geometry there by beveling. So I can bevel it, and it's just going to introduce 2 more lines and just then harden this edge. I can just do the same there and just bevel it, but that's going to introduce more geometry. Or another way that I can get a sort of hard edge is by creasing. So I can go to the crease tool, which is just up here, and I can say, like, if I do it like 100%, that's going to be a perfect 90-degree angle, and then it's going to just harden that edge. When I say 90-degree, it's just going to really harden those edges. And I can do the same with this one. I can do it at 100%. If I select that edge from the command type 100, it's just going to start hardening that surface. It's just hardening the edges where they meet. I can run the command again, 100, and it's just going to start doing that. And if I get to a point here, I can then select this one. I can select this one. I can select this one. And again, I can just run the crease command. Do that again, sorry. Press enter, type 100, press enter, and you'll end up with something that looks like that. And the beautiful thing is now we can start to push and pull these faces, you know, however we want. And it will start to give us some more geometry. So following that same logic, we can start to just build up this other side, and then we can start to build up these other ramps as well, where they come off, and we can start to bring them in and start to work with it like that. And if we want to start to bring this down, so I'm just going to select these faces at the end, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete them, and that way we end up with an end just like so. And I can just then push this up. Okay, I can select that edge, start to push it down to bring it to the point where it's going down. I select this one, start to push it down. I can select this one. I can start to push it down. And because we have the Google data, we know what's going to be actually accurate to reality. So that's really one of the beauties of having this data. So that's showing you how we can start to use OSM data, FBX data, and how we can then start to model in more detail. It's a really powerful tool, and if you get better at using these tools, you're going to be so much better at modeling, at the different skills, and it's just another skill that you have that will help you to know when to use it. So if I mix sub-D and NURBS modeling, I can really start to create really intricate site models. So I hope that's been helpful. We're now ready to continue modeling. If you have any questions, you can always sign up for an ADD tutorial with either myself or one of my colleagues, and we'll be happy to strive to help you. Thank you so much.